I'd like to introduce Mike. Mike Schmitt is the Associate Dean of the College of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resource Sciences. And he's provided an enormous amount of statewide leadership and vision for the college in his efforts. So please welcome Mike Schmitt.
Morning, folks. It is great to be here today, and I want to say that for those of you in the room, especially who've weathered, I think, some pretty cold weather and possible impending weather this afternoon. It's a privilege to be on this program and to talk about a program that I think is really important to soil fertility research in Minnesota, and that's the AFREC program. And I've had the privilege of working with AFREC from kind of the beginning, and in my role, of administration in the college, I've been able to oversee the program, and we are administering a communications project for all researchers, U of M researchers and others. So I do have a good purview on what's been going on with the AFREC program for many, many years. Today, I want to focus on the economics of AFREC. And I think that that's really important, that we realize that this isn't just a program that's affecting a single farmer or a single community. It's affecting everybody in the state of Minnesota. And I think that's a pretty safe statement. I want to start with just refreshing us on the goals of the AFREC program. And the goals of the AFREC program are to advance soil fertility research, technology development, and education, improve understanding and ability to maintain and manage soil fertility, provide valuable data-driven insights on nutrient management, and let's not forget, promote environmentally and economically sound nutrient practices. That's AFREC's vision and its goals. But I hope you realize that that's also the University of Minnesota's goals and vision as well for all of the researchers that we have working in soil fertility. So there's a wonderful overlap between AFREC and the University of Minnesota. And that's why I feel comfortable talking about AFREC from my position at the University of Minnesota. Bruce alluded to some of these numbers. I just want to make sure that you all realize that AFREC has been a game changer for nutrient management research at the University of Minnesota. It says here it began in 2008, and that's when the money started flowing. But in a second, I'll tell you that George Ream and others started this, the campaign towards getting a checkoff fund or a funded soil fertility program several years before that. There's a $40 per ton fee on fertilizer sold. Bruce talked about, and there's a board that oversee the whole process of AFREC. So AFREC, I think, is a program that's been tested. It's true. It's working. Now, I want to just for 1 second talk about the people that have been working on this. These are a lot of our soil fertility researchers at the University of Minnesota. Now, AFREC does fund research that's not University of Minnesota researchers, but the majority of projects have been with the University of Minnesota. And I hope you recognize most of these. They will all be speaking today. And I did throw in a picture in the bottom left-hand corner there of someone that did not get any AFREC dollars. And Bruce mentioned this already, and that's George Ream, who is the reason, behind the funding that it is. George was a champion for years, recognizing that, we struggled to get funding for soil fertility research for decades. And George championed this. He got some, slow but sure champions in the industry, at the legislature, et cetera. And, this started then in 2008. So these are the people that you're going to hear from, that this funding has made a difference to them. So I want to talk about economic analysis. Now, I'm not an economist. I'm a soil fertility researcher. And we're going to have a slight technical adjustment here. I want to make sure that you recognize that I've been working with some economists, primarily one at the University of Minnesota, Bridget Tuck, who's an economist that's been working with us, doing a lot of economic impact programming. And she's got a software program, et cetera, that she puts the data in. So if you question some of the numbers, you're questioning an entire tool that the economists use. When we look about the economics of AFREC, the top bullet here talks about what impact has the research had on the farmers. And we've got a lot of researchers that can tell you what the return on investment is at a local level, on a field level, on a farm level. I want to focus on going beyond the farm level. How much has AFREC research helped boost the state's economy? Because I think that that's where we really need to look at AFREC being not just a private good to select farmers, but it's a public good to the state of Minnesota and beyond that. So what I'm going to do is just, I'm going to go, just hold on one second here. Oh, try it now. Sorry about that glitch. Talk about economic impact. And what we need to understand is that there's three components to the economic impact when we look to a broader measure, and that's the direct effects. The direct effects are, if we put on more fertilizer, that's going to directly affect the fertilizer manufacturing business. The indirect effects are, if you make more money, where is that money going to go and be spent directly? Maybe spent on buying new equipment, buying new land, things like that. And the induced effects are the secondary effects. Well, by having more profits or more money in the economy, we may have, better health care, better, there's a cascading effect of the money in an economy. So these are the components, and together they're going to, be the result will be what the economic impact is of the research. I'm going to describe three scenarios quickly this morning because I'm short on time here, which is fine. Three scenarios that we can group 100 of our projects into. Okay, the first scenario is when fertilizer use decreases, yet crop yields remain the same. Okay, inputs decreased, crop yield remain the same. And that example, I'm gonna use Fabian Fernandez as an example. He's had multiple years of research funded by AFREC that have shown that in his work that in corn after soybeans, we are applying approximately 30 pounds, almost 30 pounds. It's a shy less than that when I looked at the numbers per acre of nitrogen that could have not been applied. So if you calculate this out, and I will add that the Department of Ag has provided numbers. I gave this presentation a couple of months ago, and the Department of Ag came and shared some numbers with me that would say that they also have data that would support, this 28, 29 pounds per acre, in a total balance. So there is some validity to this number, but what does that economic impact have? And let's just focus for a second on the direct. The direct impact is $1.7 million. Okay, and that's because if you apply less fertilizer, that's going to negatively affect the fertilizer industry. But the profitability to the farmer is going to be in the indirect. And that's where we've got an increase over 5.6 million acres of $29 million. And then the induced effects are at $56 million. And Bridget summarized it this way, according to the software that she uses across the state for many projects. Again, this wasn't created just for AFREC, et cetera. But you can see that money flows, in a community in many different ways. $83.5 million impact of the research that Fabian had in that particular project that he had over a few years. Again, we can, there's assumptions that are made in all of these, but I hope you get to see that, there's some really strong impact going on here. The second scenario that I just want to talk about is that fertilizer use remains the same and yields increase. And when you think about that, how does that happen, Mike? Well, think about 4R management. What are we doing out there that we can apply the same amount of fertilizer, but it'll have a better yield? Maybe we applied the fertilizer at a better timing or things like that. Well, Vasu Sharma is the person who I'm going to say has had a study for a few years looking at on irrigated land, and that's, over on the left-hand side, 280,000 acre impact here, because that's our irrigated corn acres. And she was showing that by better management, there can be a 12 bushel per yield increase. So, the direct cost is actually a negative there because they use less input, and the input here was water management, not fertilizer. It was water management. They used less water. Someone didn't sell as much water, but the indirect effects were positive. $6 million induced, almost $11 million. The end of the day, this was $16.5 million to the community in total economic impact from this type of particular research. The third scenario is when fertilizer use increases and yield increases even more. Okay, and this is a very common scenario. All three scenarios happen. And like I say, we could group all of the research projects into one of those three, and people on my team and Bridget have categorized them all. I'm just giving you examples right now. In this case, it was Jeff Betch's study looking at sulfur on corn. And again, we're looking at corn after soybeans because that was a project that Jeff did over a period of years. And in this, he found a 4.3 bushel per acre yield increase on the acres of corn after soybeans. Now you may say, well, that's not true in every corn after soybean acre. You can make that assumption. You can narrow that down. But I think when we look at the broad scale here, over those millions of acres, we've got $19 million of direct impact because we're going to be selling more fertilizer. But the indirect effects is that the profitability of applying that fertilizer is even greater on the bottom line. That's that indirect effect. Induced effects are even greater at $92 million because the money doesn't stay. Profitability usually results in investments for a producer. They spend that money either on land, and that's why, that top one, real estate, goes into land, it goes into wholesalers, non-durable goods, but it also goes into healthcare situations because that's in the community. And again, all of these are documented, and Bridget could explain this even more. So I'm using up my time quickly here. I had 15 minutes. I think I've taken all of it. Is that AFREC research projects really have an economic impact beyond what you see on a field basis. The field basis does affect the producer. It does, and I'm glad it does. It should. But what we've got to remember is that when a producer and a group of producers do well, that money flows into the community. It flows into other businesses. It flows, to the co-ops, to the retailers, et cetera, because more money is more business, and then that even spreads out into the community in other ways. So our data has shown that AFREC has had great economic value, public economic value for the state of Minnesota. And with that, I am going to say thank you for listening, and we'll go with that.
Any questions from the audience for Mike before we move on? Okay, very good. Thank you, Mike.